which we are now gathered for here today. We're very, very overwhelmed by the attendance. We didn't expect as much success, although the next edition next year will, I no doubt, see even more participants sitting here. First of all, I would like to thank our partners, Singapore, the MAS, as well as Elevandi, for the tremendous effort, and of course my own team from the State Secretariat and my Minister of Finance of Switzerland, who supported us in all our efforts. Also the Swiss National Bank, the Swiss Supervisory Agency, FINMA, and of course the BIS Hub. Without further ado, and of course also many thanks to the sponsors who chipped in. You know, it's always sort of a risk, but what are we here for if not assessing risk to participate in this event? I will pass the floor to Supnendu. The rules are no questions are off limits, no answers are off limits, and questions will go both ways.
Yeah, you can come to us. Well, before we start the day, let's get the most important chart of the day. Let's get the slide up. Okay. By the 0.0 forum was not designed for this. So, we're at a very interesting time now. Now, both of you have been sure to tell us what you think about this.
I guess, is my mic working? Yeah, all right. So my reaction to this opening chart is the good fortune that Chris and I have of having been through these before. And if you zoom back, you know, it was 2 years ago this month, Bitcoin was about $8,000 US. Today, I think it's at 20 or 21,000 US dollars. You know, clearly there is volatility in this market. I think I was involved in the earliest days of Web 1.0, and there was a lot of volatility. And pets.com went away and Webband went away, but that doesn't mean that these platforms weren't here to stay to create a lot of value, both for consumers, for and economic value. So I view it as part of the maturation of early industries. Yeah. And you know, I think for Team Ripple, it's very much stay the course. Things are going well. Let's keep going.
Oh, that's it is. That's the time of bear market is actually the best time to build. So typically companies that remain focused, laser focused on solving real customer problems and delivering value to the customer during bear market cycles, follow the cycle, those are the companies that tend to capture most of the opportunities when the markets eventually turn. And we've seen the cyclical nature of this industry play out multiple times. So I'd say this is not coincidence.
Well,
Well, I think your answer was, all I see is a yellow line. So let me ask again, do you also see maybe reason for the change, reason for more thought to be into the topic of blockchain technology, you know, what it can be used for? Or are you just saying, oh no, we're on a good track and it will all happen eventually? What's your take on this?
I think there is no question that one of the challenges for the crypto market is to focus less on speculation and more on utility. You know, any industry, if it's just about speculation, I don't think that's sustainable long term. But I do think, and as Chris just said, I think during these times, you have people building solutions on these technologies that solve real world problems. And if we do that over an arc of time, I think these are clearly technologies that are here to stay. The market, even at these dramatically reduced values, is still, I think, around $1 trillion.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a time to focus on utility and solving real problems. If we're just focused on the speculation, I think these are markets that won't survive.
I'm glad you used the two words, speculation and utility, which gives us the chance to ask, okay, how are you going as a profit-seeking private branch, private enterprises, startups, how are you going to transition, into what one would call an utility, what one would maybe call a public good that has to be provided by the state, And this is what we're here for, and what you can sort of ask us about. How are we going to bring this about together?
So I think the first thing to do is to zoom out a little bit and look at a longer time frame, because this is a breakthrough technology that changes the foundational layer of how internet works. It takes decades for this to be fully implemented. It's not overnight. Now, the good news is that if you compare where the industry is today versus the last time we had a serious downturn in 2018, you've got literally $30 billion plus dollars in VC investments into this space. You've got the smartest engineers and product people entering the space, leading Web2 companies. So the industry has the talent, the capital and time to build these solutions so that by 2025, 2030, nobody's questioning the utility of crypto and blockchain as this foundational layer that kind of adds the ownership to what you have today in the internet space.
I'll just add on. I mean, from the earliest days, Ripple, I've been at Ripple 7 years, and from the earliest days, we were focused on this enterprise blockchain opportunity to solve a cross-border payments problem. You know, we now have signed up hundreds of regulated financial institutions around the world. 95% of those customers are non-US customers, and we have billions of dollars of flows going through. So for us, we've always been, I think, clearly focused on how do we solve a real problem for customers, and that has driven demand. And I think, you know, another topic we'll talk about up here is the regulatory dynamic of being sure that, hey, when there are clear rules, if they're not clear rules, ask for clear rules. And if there are, let's make sure we are working within them. And that certainly has been Ripple's posture, I think Crypto.com's posture from the beginning.
You know, one question, very basic question, almost every regulators are now asking this. What does this coin do? What is the real, this coin's, what utility? Is there a real use of this coin? Do they have a real asset behind it? We yesterday debated on the original construct of the coin, supposed to generate a new economic activity with real cash flow associated with the coin. But it seems to me that that has divorced. Coin has moved to a speculative construct, and the real utility objective has taken a back door, or almost like a by the way thing now. And given you are in this interesting time, and many of us compare you the dot-com era, that where the things went to 2.0, but the difference now here is, unlike that era where the dot-com collapsed, the regulators are hyperactive even at the point of inflection. So I think both of you should at least give us a sense, can we bring the tokens, the coin, back to real economy?
I'll dive in here. Well, first of all, the good news is I very much agree with that. And I have publicly said I think the vast majority of tokens will go away over a period of time, because I can't figure out the utility. I mean, there's some that, you know, were created a little bit as a satirical, sarcastic. Dogecoin is a clear example of, it was never designed with utility. The founders have left the project. It moves based upon the tweets of Elon Musk. And you know, that would be, to me, the definition of, okay, what is the utility? This is purely speculative. I don't think that's healthy for the crypto market. But then I also think there are tokens where you see lots of interesting entrepreneurs, lots of people taking advantage of, as Chris described, these are revolutionary technologies that can be used to solve real problems. But you're happening in different parts of the ecosystem. And I certainly think what Ripple is doing with XRP, with what other companies are doing with XRP, a open source, decentralized digital asset, there's lots of utility, there's lots of use case. And I think you'll continue to see that grow.
Well, before you respond, congratulations. Now you have a responsibility to make this By the way, they got the license and principal approval to run in Singapore. So it's a big hand too. So before you go to answer the question, I think now you have a responsibility to bring the coins to the exchange, which have real meaning to life.
Right. So first of all, it's a great privilege to receive the in-principle approval as a major payment institution, VP to business in Singapore. Singapore has one of the highest standards in terms of approach to regulation, and regulates thoughtfully in a way that doesn't stifle innovation, which is a fine line to thread, but Singapore has done a tremendous job at this. So I thank you very much for the support from the teams who have been working on this for a while. It's also, it is also a great responsibility to run a regulated business at scale that involves our retail customers. So we take it very seriously, and from day one we've always put compliance and regulation and security as kind of the foundational layer for what we do. And we will continue to do so. And there's definitely a lot of fluff in the market. I'll agree with Brad. And I welcome this downturn because this is an opportunity for all this to go away. So the people who are here for the long term, who believe that cryptocurrency is a net positive impact on a global scale, this is the time to demonstrate how do you continue building, be the steady hand, be the calming voice in the volatile times, and just deliver real value. So we take this very seriously, and we'll, with other responsible players in the market, we'll push the industry forward in a way that is safe for the consumer.
Can I dig deeper or ask maybe the same question more harshly? What I heard from you is, well, it takes time and we have the talent. Then I heard from you, well, there is also a value proposition, there is some utility somewhere there, and we want to make it happen. And we need clear rules. I think the rules in financial markets, they are basically, in one sentence, do no harm. In the sense, be stable, protect your customers, be in complete integrity of the markets. But that will not apply to the sort of the utility, the decentralized, the open, the community-based approach, the value added, the value proposition that is actually in the blockchain. But let's put that aside, the sort of the beyond financial markets questions to you. I have one question that maybe after the yellow line, very interesting line, we talked about. The second most important question maybe for the audience also is, currently, we live in a world of sanctions that mostly, not only, but very vastly affect financial services. And there was an issue, especially for Switzerland, who had to interpret the EU sanctions all the way along. And suddenly there arose the question of crypto assets. And we fortunately in our regulation were immediately there said, okay, no way. All crypto assets that are regulated in Switzerland are already comprised in what the EU meant by saying assets. So how is your business affected by, not in a way, is it going better or worse, but how are you compliant to the rule, do no harm, in under current sanctions regimes? Because this is really at the top of everything.
Can I? Please. Thanks. So first of all, I would like to start by saying that it's impossible to just ignore the general economic environment, the macro and its impact. And we're talking about cryptocurrency and the price chart. But if you compare it to equities, S&P was like 8 trillion this year versus 500, right? So there is all this is interconnected, and you cannot ignore the fact that it's not only about crypto. Obviously, there's space for improvement, and you could see that what's happening in the industry and over the last couple of weeks. I view this as an opportunity for players who demonstrated that they're operating questionable business models or they have poor risk management frameworks, kind of exit the industry, and as a result, the responsible parties will take it forward in a more stable fashion, if you will. So this is a very important point to make. And in terms of the sanctions, our first product that we launched was a Visa card in 2018 that allowed users to spend crypto at that time 50 million plus locations globally. Like before we even launched it, we had to have a Big Four firm review our KYC AML and sanctions frameworks for robustness. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to even launch it with a global brand like Visa. Today, it's the largest program of this kind globally, operating in all major markets. Millions of people are using it every month. It's a very good product, and the setup that we have is not unlike any challenger bank, if you will. In some cases, because our tech stack is more recent, it's actually more advanced, this is the norm. This is the norm. I want everybody to understand. There's no industry players here. This is the absolute basic hygiene for every responsible player in the crypto industry. It's if new guidance being implemented following the invasion of Ukraine, right? All the players immediately implemented these sanctions. So I think that the narrative here that cryptocurrency may be in some ways used to go around it, it's just not true.
When it comes to circumventing payment systems, for example, SWIFT, how are you dealing with that challenge?
So for those that aren't familiar, Ripple from the beginning has been signing up regulated financial institutions to solve a cross-border payments problem. Some people have called it an alternative to SWIFT. That's a fair characterization. We only work with regulated financial institutions. And so the enforcement of KYC, AML, OFAC, FATF, any sanction is enforced at those endpoints. So we don't have any customers. Prior to this, we didn't have any customers in Russia or Ukraine. We don't have any customers there today. To me, some of the noise about using crypto to circumvent sanctions was noise. It wasn't really something that could be done at scale. I'm sure there are examples where small amounts of crypto may have gone from an account that might have been based in a country that has sanctions, and certainly it's not happening via Ripple. I don't expect that is happening via crypto.com. But I think the liquidity in the crypto markets to solve really the liquidity needed for Russia to circumvent sanctions, I think the idea that crypto is a real solution is a red herring.
As we're in this regulatory question, I think there are many central banker regulators on the crowd here. I think they still struggle with this space when it comes to transparency, traceability, at least on the wallet side, how they're maintaining that KYC onboarding. Is there any way to clarify that from a technology progress perspective? Have we reached to a point where we have technology solutions which can solve the whole stack of regulatory compliance requirement? Is there something you can throw some light, both of you? We'll start with Brad.
First of all, I think this is reg tech. You run fintech for MAS. Reg tech, I think, is a fascinating area. It's not an area where Ripple participates. Certainly, we could be a customer of some of those solutions. I think there is market demand, and you could use, to the points that we've made up on stage around utility, you could use a blockchain to manage identity and make it federated in such a way that various exchanges around the world could rely upon verified KYC identity. I haven't seen that happen at scale, and I think that would have to happen as a private-public partnership. Again, because Ripple only works with regulated institutions, it's not a problem we're particularly focused on. But
This is very interesting. I don't want to lose this point here. When this is where crypto.com can come in, most of the volumes on the crypto exchanges are not on-host wallets. They're all off-host wallets. It's really difficult to do a full regulatory compliance on those wallets. How do you deal with that?
I think the effective way for regulators to approach this problem is to look at the large-scale bridges between the world of traditional finance and the crypto economy. So if make sure that all the large players adhere to the regulatory frameworks that already exist today. Okay, you don't need to invent new stuff. It solves vast majority of the problem.
But your volumes come from all this off-chain wallets, and how do you deal with that?
So actually, one could argue that blockchains being fully transparent, and now there are pretty sophisticated tools that can monitor the movement of funds throughout the entire history of it, right? One could argue that you can more effectively monitor and stop illicit activity than in the traditional world of fiat. The tools are better, it's more transparent, and you have more visibility, and it's pretty much real time, basically. Okay. And I will also challenge the fact, the statement that a lot of this activity is happening in the world of decentralized finance. If you look at the numbers in terms of the volumes, it's still today mostly on centralized exchanges.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, the other word that you used, I think, is very important, is transparency.
Yeah.
I think that the crypto industry, and as Chris was just introducing, many people in the crypto industry try very hard to be very good actors, and they act with transparency. Certainly, Ripple has been publishing quarterly markets reports of how we look at what's happening at Ripple, what's happening in the XRP ecosystem. We've been doing this for 4 or 5 years. There's never been a demand for us to do that. It's just what we think is the right thing to do to help grow this industry. We've actually also encouraged other crypto participants to act with the same level of transparency, because transparency builds trust. And when we were backstage, we were talking about the value of trust. And I think that those that don't support that transparency are not actually constructive to building these markets in the way that I think is optimal for long-term success.
We promised that you can come back to us. One, and this is almost like an open, candid conversation here. Many players complain that regulators are trying to put a rule from a different era to this new world of Web 3.0. How much you feel strongly about that?
I agree.
Yeah, agree that they're right?
No, I think what Chris just said is exactly right. There are rules, there are foundational rules around KYC, around AML. Those shouldn't change. And I don't look at it at all as, hey, we're trying to use outdated rules and put it on a new industry. In fact, at the World Economic Forum just a brief while ago, I was on a panel with another person in the crypto industry who said that the rules need to adapt to the industry. And I said, that is dead wrong. That we can't, as a crypto industry, we can't come out with the point of view that the rules need to adapt to us. I think that's backwards.
You agree with him?
Yeah, I would want to ask another question on this one, because this is in fact what we were trying to do in Switzerland. We were looking at what you're doing, and then on the general basis of, well, what can humans possibly do? We have all the categories. Let's just open the drawers and put whatever you do into the existing drawers. I'm not always convinced. This was the question I wanted to ask you. What do you need from us? Where have we failed you in the sense of, or are not there yet, in the sense of traditional regulation? And on your point of transparency, yes, transparency creates trust, but maybe also you need to know how your transparency is qualified. Standards for transparency also need. It's nice to write the brochure, but what's in the brochure is maybe more important. So these two questions on transparency and also on, do we have to fine-tune our technology-neutral regulation to a new technology, because it is a different story.
First of all, it has to be said that in this particular context, right, we look at what's happening globally, right? Singapore and Switzerland are the examples of how to do it the right way. When you look at some, when you look at, if you look at other jurisdictions, very frequently there is just absolute lack of clarity, and sometimes lack of clarity on purpose, so that you could, regulate through other means, right? And it doesn't serve anybody. I think both regulators here are on the right track. We only wish, as an industry, that more jurisdictions would have taken the cue. And this is the right way to do it.
I very much agree with that, and I think, frankly, we should have at the beginning said, I think what Singapore and Switzerland are doing certainly is leading the pack. I agree wholeheartedly that the lack, I said earlier that I think most people in the crypto industry want to act with clarity, within the rules. What's tough is, where are the rules? And in some countries, that's very difficult. I mean, I'm thrilled that we're 30 minutes into a conversation and we haven't yet talked about the United States, because the United States is not leading as a company based in the US and as a citizen based in the US. And, Ripple for years was asking for US regulatory clarity for years and years and years. And then obviously in the United States, the US took the step of saying, well, some of you may not be aware, but the United States Securities Exchange Commission filed a lawsuit saying that, hey, we view XRP, this decentralized digital asset, as a security, which of course, exactly as Chris said, regulation through enforcement is a very, very ineffective way to approach this. And I think what we've seen in Switzerland, what we've seen in Singapore, is much more constructive partnership with the private sector. And I think that is a model for many other countries.
Now we have another 40 minutes to go. I think let's switch to what road ahead for us. And by the way, if the audience has a very pressing question, we may get a couple of from the audience, but the question now, looking forward. Well, I have my own way of explaining this thing, looking forward. Let me try. If we take the whole world of token economy, there are 4 buckets. There's this private currencies, bucket number 1. And then the bucket number 2, private currencies backed by algorithm, some more private currency, and some with fiat money market instrument. That's the second bucket, stable coin. Then the third buckets are central bank backed digital currencies, retail, wholesale. Then the fourth bucket is all the assets getting tokenized extremely or fractionalized, projects which tokens back on real economy. If you take this 4 bucket and you build a roadmap against each of the bucket, in your own way, how do you see this future going forward? In the meantime, audience, have your question ready. We'll ask Mike to go around to pick up. Yeah, sorry.
It's an excellent question. I view this through the lens of expansion of use cases. As an industry, we started with Bitcoin, the store of value narrative. I gradually moved from this to programmable money with smart contracts. And then, we've seen emergence of things like blockchain gaming. What do you see next as the infrastructure improves? If you'll see entire social networks and the entirety of Web3 running on this infrastructure. But it's important to know that today the infrastructure is not ready for majority of these use cases. There are challenges in terms of speed, in terms of security. There's tremendous amount of problems in that area, hacks happening all the time. User experience is bad. So there's a lot of very basic stuff that needs to be built over the next 5, 6, 7 years so that we could see emergence of use cases that gradually engage the broadest of population. And we cross the chasm and hit early majority and eventually majority. And there's also a lot of opportunities. I mentioned tokenizing real estate, tokenizing stocks. There's a lot of stuff that has been talked about for the last few years, but have not been executed in a way where it reaches certain scale yet.
And Chris, this is where I found many founders not excited about the bucket number 4. They think there's no volume. Why should we get excited about it?
Bear markets are perfect for this.
So
Bear markets are perfect for this because you just hunker down, you focus on the problem, look for creative solutions. There's a lot of brilliant people in the industry, and this will eventually be figured out. And you could assume that new financial centers will emerge, those that get it right, so that support this kind of innovation and grow with it.
I completely agree. I mean, at the very beginning of this session, we talked about utility versus speculation. I mean, to me, it is all about the path forward is utility, solving real problems. And there are very compelling opportunities. You talked about tokenization of assets. Just yesterday, I was on a call with an entrepreneur pitching this idea around if you tokenize the rights and licensing of content, particularly this is a Hollywood-based person, but he was describing the infrastructure around managing rights and licensing and money flows associated with those rights. You have hundreds of people in these various studios managing this. If you can tokenize that and actually enable it through smart contracts, you can make this much more transparent and much more efficient. Again, from the beginning, Ripple has been focused on enterprise use cases for blockchain. You talked about central bank CBDCs. Ripple today has signed 2 deals we publicly announced with the countries of Bhutan and Palau to help them prototype central bank digital currencies using the efficiency of the XRP ledger. As Chris talked about, there's a lot of technologies in this space that are slow and they're expensive. And I think over time, people learn that different technologies will have different use cases that solve different problems, and the efficiency of some blockchains will rise to the top in other use cases, and the lack of efficiency will be used in other cases.
Well, I think that's right. I think to Chris' point, when you go back to the internet era, when the .com bust happened, there are 3 things which was uncertain: the business model, the consumer adoption, and the infrastructure. All are weak, and that the market collapsed. I think we are in a way in the same state now. The consumer adoption is not clear. They themselves not clear. They're speculating on the assets. The infrastructure is still a long way to go, and the business models are still early stage. So if you take that tech stack which powers this 4 types of currencies, is there going to be a focus? I know Ripple's from by design, you are infrastructure driven. Will you see a lot of investment getting into the infrastructure layer more than speculating on the currency, promise of the currency?
If I can chip in on, utility is not a bad word, but it has connotation of, it is not profitable. Often states are providing utilities. You heard the accusation that through too big to fail regulation, we forced our commercial banks into being mere utilities, So is there also a cause to be made, or is this going to happen? As you said, it takes time, and eventually, and with the right regulatory framework, it will happen. Or does it take more? Meaning, does it take a state, or is this going to be just fine as it is?
I would say that, first of all, the infrastructure today is to a large extent broken. And there's a lot of conversation going on, this blockchain versus that blockchain, right? We collectively need to realize that 20, 30%, 50% improvement over top tier performer today gets us nowhere. We need to have multiple orders of magnitude breakthroughs. And these are actually very tough technical challenges. If you look at the standard trilemma of decentralization, security, and performance, right? This is tough stuff, and it will take time to solve these problems. But I believe that the industry today has everything that it needs to make this happen over the next couple of years. And I don't think that we should worry too much about business models. New stuff will emerge.
Okay.
We just need to give it a little bit of patience because this is hardcore R&D.
Well, I promise there are a couple of questions we'll take from the audience. Is there anybody? Yes, one here.
Thank you. Jonathan from the Bitcoin Foundation. Thank you very much. You've been explaining how we want to move from speculative environment to utility. How are we planning to do that when most of the infrastructure provider and gateways to the crypto space, mainly the crypto exchanges, are not incentivized nor educated to do that shift? Meaning that most of the revenues are generated from the speculative environment that you can most of the time fake or buy. And yet, whenever we go with a real product onto those exchanges, the questions asked are still wrong. Meaning that how big is your Telegram or Discord community, which is not real users, it's a community, or how many, what's the daily volume that you can bring to the exchange? So those are still the wrong question. In our cases, with 200,000 downloads of our app, with daily active volumes genuine, we still cannot access to these spaces because we don't want to buy for that. There's still a lot of education required. And again, I don't see the incentive for those infrastructure providers to shift into that direction. So what are the plans?
I got a question. There's an infrastructure incentive, which I asked. Is there enough incentive to shift that narrative there? We can take one more question and then we can answer both. I think the lady up there.
Hi there, Victoria Wells, Old Law, Australia. The law isn't really considered an area of innovation, and we're looking at things that are inherently transnational. What does a regulator that is proactive, agile, innovation, enthusiastic, what do they look like, and what are you hoping for?
I know I have a friend there whom she's trying to get a question. So that's the last question for the patient. So we have I think she's asking for a template. How does a good regulator look like? I think you know the answer.
Handsome, blue shirt, dark jacket.
Hi, good morning. Irene Arias from Magdalena. So I want to just bring the perspective from emerging markets. Chris, you just said the industry will make it happen in terms of making sure that it's utility, not speculation. But what about, and how do you bring and not leave people behind, particularly in markets like in Latin America and the Caribbean is where I focus, where most people have not even access Web 1. So how do you make sure that there is access to these with real value for people that sometimes are like last mile and have little access? Thanks.
Can I take this one first? The
Yes.
last one?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a paradox because you do not have to explain the value of cryptocurrency, like the inherent value of cryptocurrency, to anybody in Turkey or anybody in Argentina. They feel the pain of really high level of inflation, and they want to get access to a system that helps them preserve the value of their money, and the adoption in this kind of emerging markets where these problems are a day-to-day conversation over a dinner table for families is actually much higher than in let's say G7. It's a surprising factor. And then the second part of the question is how do we help? And I think being the bridge between the traditional finance and the crypto economy is important, and you do it in partnership with local regulators by getting licensed, by making sure that you follow all the basic things like KYC, AML, and sanctions, and you do not allow illicit activity on your platform, and you educate the consumer about any potential risks that are involved if using the product.
I'll comment on that.
The third question.
The third question and the second question. Very, very quickly on the third question. It strikes me that one of the great things about what's happening is we're in the same way the internet made the world more flat, and the last mile access to information, the ability to access information became ubiquitous anywhere around the world. And I think that the last mile here, and I agree with what Chris said, I think the last mile here also, assuming you have connectivity, is easier to solve, which is, I think, a very, very good thing for the industry. The second question, what does a good regulator look like? They don't wear jeans on stage. Sorry. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, of course. And we were joking backstage before I got up here. Isn't it interesting that Chris and I came wearing a suit and tie and the regulators were a little more casual?
This is the path to licensing.
This may not be the smartest path to licensing. No, look, I think the answer to the question, in my opinion, is clarity and efficiency of engagement. Like, there's some countries where I feel like they've outlined rules and then you engage and it takes a long time, lethargic, or which words do we use? Considerate, thorough, which can take a long time. Look, I really deeply believe the vast majority of people acting in the crypto market want to be good actors, and they want to engage with government, and they want to engage in an efficient way. So clear rules of the road, clear engagement models, and some reasonable efficiency in that engagement for the speed at which you get answers to the questions that may go back and forth.
And there can also be women who never wear ties.
Yeah, sorry.
I think we are up the time. I think sorry, you have one pressing question, but keep it very short. We are running out of time. Yeah.
Discovery aspect of it, which we are focused on, which provides continuous transparency on the underlying token of the real asset, right? And I think that's what the basic link is on the fourth point that you had mentioned about.
I think the price discovery comes from the exchange crypto.com.
Yes, but I think that you have to continuously value the real assets, and there's a way to do those things, right? It's the fourth one, not on the third line.
So quick response. We are almost at the time.
Right. Again, it's a complex market, right? There's a lot of participants, and I think that there's a responsibility on exchanges, especially those that have large scale of operations, to play the role of a guardian. Do not let any stuff that is complete fluff, that doesn't have any utility or doesn't have the required scale in. And you need to be able to evaluate the technology, the project, the potential, and then make decisions accordingly.
Thank you. I think you want to close.
I was just going to say this was much less controversial than I thought, but insightful. And I think what we should have also done, or what will maybe hopefully over the course of this day also emerges. So really, what are the takeaways here? How are we going forward? How are we going to stay in a conversation? Apparently, we're doing well so far, both our jurisdictions. There was the question on how are you going to sort of export that model? It needs to be a global model, because you also pointed out the breaks and in the system that leads to also the accusations. So this is a steep, task to assume, because we're facing big blocks. You mentioned the US, but we will not rest. And neither on that front, but also on the front of really continuing the conversation and filling in what you need as framework conditions to do your work that apparently needs time and talent. And that's all we need. Very good.
Thank you.